My name's Andrew Stuck. I'm from Walk, Listen, Create. We're a social enterprise based in Belgium. We're here supporting walking artists, sound walkers, writers, performers, all sorts. So thank you very much for signing up, especially to those of you who've chipped in €5 to the funds. So that's fantastic. It's Soundwalk September. I don't know where we are in Soundwalk September, but we're about halfway through, or almost halfway through Soundwalk September. And our two guests for this event are very much familiar with Soundwalks. They're going to introduce themselves, but I'm just going to give you a hint of who or what they are. Ralph Hoyte is a poet, writer, and a located audio designer. And Helen Ottaway is a musician and composer, and happens also to have made some audio and sound walks. The key thing is that they've never collaborated together before. What's happened has been that Helen was commissioned to create a piece called Lacrimae, which was a choral piece, I believe, Helen? A choral piece?
Sort of, yeah, choral and voices and strings.
And it was geolocated on the South Dorset Ridgeway by Ralph and his team at SatSynth. And then more recently, Helen was the curator of an intriguing listening festival in Frome in 2019, for which she commissioned Ralph Hoyte and SatSynth to create a sound walk within the town. So they know each other through making work and being commissioned by each other, but they've never actually collaborated. So this is a conversation between the two of them, to which we hope you'll join at some point. And I'm going to hand you over to Helen and Ralph to walk us within.
Right. We haven't actually decided who's going to go first with the introductions. What do you think, Ralph?
Toss a coin. You can go. You go.
Okay, I'll go. Over the years, I've collaborated with a wide range of artists from other disciplines, but up to last year, never a writer. I've set poetry to music, for example, Thomas Hardy and William Blake for my choral work, The Echoing Green, but most of my music has few or no words. Many composers get to a certain stage of their careers and then they decide they're going to write an opera, which may seem the pinnacle of narrative word setting to some. This has never much appealed to me, really, but that may seem strange when you hear some of what Ralph and I will talk about. In 2020, I applied for and got a DYCP grant from the Arts Council. DYCP stands for Develop Your Creative Practice, and the grant is designed to give you time to do just that, with no expectation of a specific outcome, which is brilliant. My application was called Walking with Words, and I planned to collaborate with 3 writers, one of whom was Ralph. It was purely experimental and explorative, a way of finding new ways of working and doing some of this through walking. The idea that walking stimulates and clarifies creative thought won't be new to anyone associated with Walk, Listen, Create, but I wanted there to be a strong connection in these collaborations between music, text, and walking. As Andrew said, Ralph and I have worked alongside each other before, but never collaborated. We've been talking about doing something together for some time, so this seemed a good opportunity. So far, we've had conversations on the internet, by phone, and lately in person, and we plan to continue this conversation here at this Walk, Listen, Create cafe. Having tried a few approaches to working together, we've decided to base our collaboration on Ralph's existing long poem, Winscombe to Priddy Nine Barrows, which is on the Mendips. Over to you, Ralph.
Yes, and okay, I'll introduce myself, but first off, I want to say that this is by no means, this is not your normal, we have done this project, we have decided how to talk about it, we're going to talk about it. This is very much how the heck do we do what we want to do, and what do we want to do, and how we're going to work together. So I see there are quite a few people in the audience who have a lot of experience in collaborating, perhaps. So we'll welcome your input later. I'm Ralph Hoyte. I'm a poet, writer, and, as Andrew said, located audio designer. And I sort of came into these things, firstly by way of poetry. I started off as a performance poet with Apples and Snakes in London I won't tell you when, it was rather a long time ago. I got a bit fed up with what was then called performance poetry because I wanted it to do more than it seemed to me it was doing. It seemed to me to be a lot more about audience pleasing and less about poetry. Please don't ask me what poetry is. That'll take the rest of the night. Poetry, at the same time, I mean, I'm a writer as well, and I'm really interested in mapping. I've always been interested in mapping. And quite by coincidence, really, after a talk by Hewlett Packard at the Watershed in Bristol in 2003, when they were talking about using what were then called mediascape technologies. I don't know if you even anyone remembers the term. Do you remember that, Andrew, mediascape? Yeah, okay, so mediascape was the first type of locative audio. In other words, trying to embed audio into landscapes, embed audio into the actual physical fabric of the land. I was just absolutely fascinated by the seminar, because a few days before that I'd been for a walk with the city archaeologist of Bristol, who was talking about, who said the pavement we're walking on is 3, or it could have been 6 meters above what it was in the 1600s. I thought, wow, God, if you could listen to those 6 layers, what would they tell you? So the next day I rang up Hewlett Packard in Palo Alto in California, and a very nice California said, yeah, well, what you want to do is contact, and did you know that they, Hewlett Packard, have a branch just outside Bristol, a lab? Talk to them. So I talked to them, and it was opportune because just at that moment Mobile Bristol was launching. So they had some money from Mobile Bristol, and Hewlett Packard were very keen to work with artists, I think mainly because we tend to throw things around and break them, and also because we're cheap to work with. So I, together with Liz Crow, a filmmaker, created what was actually the world's first audio play for an intelligent environment, as it was dubbed then, 1831 Riot. So it's a way of placing audio into the landscape. And I got really fascinated with this, set up SatSynth together with Mark Yates, contemporary classical composer, and the essential ingredient genius, Phil, the coder, audio engineer, and musician. We set SatSynth up in about 2011 and proceeded to make I suppose I'm going on, but there's so many strands to this. You see, there's not only the poetry and the music and the maps, there's also, when you look at maps, you're also looking at history. So I became very interested in using the medium and my script writing skills to write dramatized historical scenarios, which take place where the actual event happened, like on Queen Square in Bristol, which is running at the moment in 1831 riots. At the same time, I've been for years collecting, I don't know, ideas, snippets of audio, snippets of all kinds of musical things, because for me poetry has always been about the voice. I do have poetry written, but I don't attempt to have poetry published in a written form, which I think makes my practice a bit different from other poets. I suppose you could call me an oral poet. I call myself a voice poet or a voice artist. So I compose poetry for my voice and for multiple voices, and have indeed worked with number of people, including a Japanese actress, etc., etc. I'll go on about that later, to realise what I call poem scripts. So I don't know whether it's a poem. I call it a poem script. So this really led me into when I met Helen and experienced Lacrimae. It was in a ruined chapel somewhere along the Dorset Ridge, wasn't it, Helen?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was a
Chapel
really
Coppice.
Chapel Coppice, that's right. And then again in at the Frome Listen Festival, was it Lacrimae again?
Yeah, in a garden that
Yes,
time.
in a garden, yes. That was a slight, and again, we remember with Stepping Stone, with the multi-artist project Stepping Stone and the East Mendip Quarries as
That
well.
was another time we worked together.
That's
Well,
another
not
time we worked
together,
together,
but
yes.
next
So
to each other.
we've been sort of tangling slightly, sort of eyeing each other up for a few years now. So I was really pleased when Helen got this DY Develop Your Creative Practice grant and asked me to whether I'd be interested in working with her. Now, where have we got to, Helen? Yes.
Well, we've explored a few things. We've dismissed a few things. We started off thinking we might walk around the Quantocks and kind of slightly follow some of the Romantic poets. That we then thought that we might start with some kind of line, that I would write a melody line and you would write a word line. And so we've kind of gone round in a few circles and in a few lines. And we then decided that, well, you suggested, but I think it's an excellent idea, that we base our collaboration on an existing work of yours, which might seem to some people to be, well, he's done his bit, so it's all down to Helen now. But actually, I
She
think
obviously hasn't worked with me before.
there's quite a lot that can be done with this. I mean, it's a walk on the Mendips. It's a narrated walk. It has so many different aspects to it, so many different styles, that it's quite a gift to me. And I started reading through it and making notes. And this is where I come back to opera. I suddenly found myself kind of devising an opera, because the first section felt like it needed to be recitative. The other thing that Ralph and I have talked a lot about is the need, when you combine music, the need for the word heard. And Ralph had a rather shocking experience with a piece that he really liked by Alice Oswald, that had been set to music and kind of obliterated the words. So that's something that's really important to us. So when reading through the beginning of Ralph's poem, I was thinking about how the different bits of text would be best conveyed so that they can be heard and understood, but also slightly interpreted or enhanced by sound or music or even collaging, just different approaches. So I came up with, the first bit was recitative. The second bit, I think, was going to be an aria, because it suddenly started the difference between recitative.
Perhaps I should read. Sorry to interrupt. Perhaps I should actually
I
read
think
a
you
bit of
should
the poem.
read.
Do you think? Should I? Because we're
Yeah,
talking about
I
it.
think you should.
Okay, so the bits you've commented on, Helen, it's called From Winscombe to Pretty Nine Barrows, a Mendip Journey. Vetch, and the tangled optimism of Viburnum opulus. The bus does a minuet with the central theme of the A38, scraping and bowing to silver BMW X5s with 10 megabus LCD technology that works in sunlight, and a Band-Aid fixed to iDrive parked outside City Escapees bungalows. Mercedes was the daughter of Emile Genilec. Did you know? The sports field scattered land squares up to me. Intruder! Where does he fit in amongst lacrosse and the 100 yards dash? Land belongs to someone. Why does land belong to someone? Who owns it? The sheep, the cows, Sidcot School? Who owns the Mendip? We do make it all up, don't we? The ants, the tangled roots of trees, the drip of water, the sound of the drip of water. Who, did you say, owns them? In Jamaica, Mr. James, the gardener, would teeth the Bombay mango dem off before the tree. Is God him make the mango fi grow, he would say when challenged. True enough. If God him make the mango dem fi grow, is first come, first served to rotted. We is all God's children. We all have the same damn right. But stop. Maybe the mango grows itself. Don't make we argue over that religion thing is the same damn thing over which no lives are to be lost. I suppose you could say, maybe is God him make the mango fi grow, but is me father him pay your wages? You is fired. What is this lie we inhabit? Why do we inhabit it? We make it all up. Is this not astonishingly liberating? So I go on. I could go on for another 20 minutes, but perhaps
stop
I better
there.
not.
That's a good place to stop. But I guess that everybody listening can hear those gear changes, can hear that the beginning is very introductory and narrative, and then it suddenly goes into quite lyrical question asking. Land belongs to someone. Why? Why? Lots of whys. And it's suddenly on a different kind of footing. It's much more lyrical. It's much more about feeling. And then suddenly changes gear again, going into Jamaican speak. I don't know what you call that, Ralph.
Patois.
But it's patois. But
Patois, yeah.
So my reactions to those three sections, and then just at the end, it went back into a kind of echo of the questioning. So already, you've definitely got the idea of a kind of recitative, a kind of explaining, kind of almost speak song, and then the possibility of real song that might be lyrical, and then because I love the way that Ralph sounds saying the patois, I think probably straightforwardly spoken, but maybe with background. So I was really surprised that when I started to read it, it spoke in this kind of quite clear way. And I was also very surprised that I was thinking about opera. Because when Ralph and I started talking out of context, we'd been talking about song cycles, which is also a definite possibility, kind of following in the footsteps of Schubert and Schumann and Vaughan Williams and Britten, the idea of a journey through a series of songs. But somehow this kind of seems to need a bit more flexibility, variety, overlap. And so I was quite amazed that opera sprang to mind. It won't be a conventional opera, of course.
Well, I don't know what a conventional opera is. No, I was very pleased when we met in Bath, and Helen said when she read the poem, she thought it was operatic. I have actually been involved in opera projects. Sorry. I've been involved in one opera project before, which did not come to fruition because we didn't get the funding. This was to write an opera about Mary Anning, the fossil hunter in Lyme Regis. And funnily enough, I did actually apply to do a PhD in opera and new opera at Leeds and got refused. So I'm really glad I got confused, because it really screwed up my life for quite a number of years, and I don't think I would have willingly given in to the PhD rigmarole, all the rest of it. But yes, so you see, what, Helen, I mean, what I'm sort of thinking of is what I most definitely do not want to do is hand a piece of work over to somebody else and tell them take it away and do it, because I have I can't really vocalize them because I'm not a trained musician. I don't even know musical technology terminology. But I do want to explore this poem particularly. When does it turn into music? How does it turn into music? I mean, I can hear in my head. I can hear. You talk about even the first letter of it. I used to drop cap. Vetch is the name of the of Vinomon of this plant, and you say about vetch the letter V. I know it's a literary convention to make much of the first letter, as in illuminated manuscripts, but it seems to have sonic possibilities here. The V might be like the harpsichord cadence. You get to introduce a section of recitative. Perhaps you should explain what recitative
Well,
is.
recitative is a kind of very unmeasured, kind of speechy like song, and it's used in opera to move along the narrative, really, to describe things, and so you don't repeat any words in recitative, you just tell, and the harpsichord and the cello occasionally go bom bom, and then you go on to a next bit and the harpsichord and the cello will go bom bom again, and with a bit of punctuation and very, very sparse accompaniment. When it comes to arias, you might get a lot of word repetition. You might get a bit of overlapping of words if it's for more than one person. And it's much more to do with the emotion. So recitative is used for telling stuff, sort of telling the story, setting the scene, explaining things.
So,
That makes sense?
an aria is then an aria is the song bit.
Yeah, it's a song, but it's an evocation of the emotion,
Of the emotion.
experienced through those words. So there normally in an aria there'd be fewer words, but it would be, the music is meant to be expressing the emotion of that episode, of a feeling or a sensation. There's lots of stuff in between recitative and aria. There are more light-hearted songs that might be a little bit descriptive and less about emotion. And this is quite. I'm also being quite. What's the word? I'm sort of using stereotypes, and especially nowadays, operas aren't really like that. I mean, opera can be anything. So in our case, it may and will be anything, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's very interesting, because that means, because for me, as Helen said earlier, I mean, I was really interested in a performance by the Manchester Collective. In fact, I went along to the performance at St George's, and I was quite disappointed. They set a poem by Alice Oswald, a very fine poet, currently down at Dartington, isn't she? They set one of her poems for a soprano voice, and I couldn't hear any of the words. So, as a poet, I was thinking, why would I want somebody to set my poem to music if you can't hear any of the words? It's not as if the words carry meaning. I'm not particularly fond of meaning in poetry. I think words have resonance. I think resonance is much more important than actual meaning, but they need to be heard. I don't know. And if I listen to stuff, I mean, you know Cecilia Bartoli, Helen?
Not very well.
Yeah, she's a famous Italian mezzo soprano. she has incredible diction, but in a sense, it's too incredible. It's too precise. You're thinking, I want a bit more emotion there, please, Cecilia, a bit more emotion, you know? And then you listen to somebody else like the soprano with Manchester Collection and think, well, there's all emotion, there's no words. Where's the knife edge we're walking? Do we have to walk that knife edge? Can it be sometimes it's just, if it's my voice, solo voice, or a composition for multiple voices, I'm very keen on the idea of having three. I like to have three voices. You know, I've done works
Three
for
is a good
three voices.
number.
Three is a good number. So you have the three voices, and it goes into music, it comes back into poetry, it goes into something which is in between, it merges out of the other end. That's the sort of, I don't know.
Well, this is, one of the questions you were asking in our provocation was, where is the boundary between music and poetry, and is poetry music, and is music poetry? And I mean, particularly when you hear you speaking the beginning of your poem, there is certainly a point in which it starts to go into music, and not only that, but it goes into two different kinds of music. So it kind of goes into music with that questioning bit, and then with the Jamaican patois, it's another kind of, rhythm is very important, but your voice even rises and falls in a kind of melodic way depending on which section you're in. And so I think poetry is music. So you have to be very careful when you're setting poetry that that you don't kind of overstep, I suppose, that you go that you somehow go with. Although
be an interesting ride.
you could argue the opposite. I mean, for instance, if you think of the role that music plays in film, it can both underpin the emotion that's being displayed, or strengthen what's going on the screen, or it can undermine it by implying some kind of something sinister when it looks like there's nothing sinister there. So you can kind of do a little bit of both, but that's in a way what's quite interesting. And music can add a different layer in that way, I suppose.
It certainly does. Sue and I were watching a film the other night, an Argentinian film, and the soundtrack just sent shivers up my spine the whole way. But you can do the opposite, can't you? You can have, like, music doesn't have to complement, it could, what's the word? It could be counterpoint it. So Lou Reed, for example, one of Lou Reed's songs is about drug dealers in an alleyway. So a very sort of heavy subject, and it's set to a sort of a very jaunty folk music tune, you know. It has a very strong effect.
Perhaps we ought to talk about form a bit more, and the whole what it might be, and the walking, because we've talked about this being a walk, and the whole poem is a walk. It's from Winscombe to Pretty Nine Barrows. But it also could be, so it can be a geolocated walk with a soundtrack that accompanies you on the walk. But we've also talked about bringing it into a performance platform space. So I think we're quite keen to make it very flexible, aren't we?
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, we're really setting ourselves up for it, I suppose, because the other angle, apart from figuring out how a composer and a poet and writer are going to work together, is that we want to geolocate it across the Mendips in the places where the actual poem was written. So you're adding a whole new dimension here of how is a work experienced in the environment, in the landscape, and I don't know.
Well, this is an area where we have quite different experiences, I think, because I've got quite a lot of experience of putting actual sound into landscape environments, and sort of stretching music so that so that a particular individual can't hear everything and has to walk around in the music to find different bits of it. Whereas a lot of the work you've done, you carry the music or the soundscape with you.
Yes.
And those two ways of doing things are quite different, but they could be used to good effect in this walk, which is actually quite long, isn't it? So you might not be able to experience the whole thing.
No, I mean,
At once.
it's a bit difficult to discuss actually, because it adds all sorts of different, because yes, I've got a lot of experience of making located audio art. But the thing about it, usually, unless it's a linear walk, is that people can step into it at any point they want. So if you imagine that you and I have very carefully composed together a piece, and we say, yeah, we really like that, and then we put it at Laycott slates above the, did I go there? Yes, I did, looking over the Somerset levels. Somebody walks into the walks, and this is it's different vocabulary. Somebody walks into the music. It's not a vocabulary you're going to be using for a concert hall, is it? You don't walk into the music in the middle of a concert.
Well, I wonder.
But here you do walk into the music in the middle of the concert. How does it sound? How is it experienced?
Well, quite a lot of the work I've done has involved creating, making something that was whole into fragments, and then scattering the fragments. You know, the pieces that I've done where you trigger the sound by moving around. So it's a really lovely letting go of control, because you've made the material, and then it's somebody else's actions that put it together again. And actually, I think we could
very crucial. Yes.
We could think about it in those terms, so that you let go of your idea of order.
Yes.
And that might be a sense in which it might be more like a song cycle, because
that's really interesting.
You could come in at any song, couldn't you?
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. Yeah. I think we should well, anyway, because yes, the idea of serendipity and is very important in everything I do, actually, and especially with located audio, where your body is the action, and the way you navigate, the way you move through a soundscape is the actual musical instrument, in a sense. That's a very interesting idea, that if you bend at a certain angle, you get one thing. I mean, I know we can do all these things in SatSynth, working with Phil, for example. To hold the phone up one way, you get one. You get hold the phone up to heaven, you get heavenly tones. Hold it down to earth, you get the voice of hell. We can do 4-way points of view. You put different sounds at each point of the compass, and you mix the sounds by the way you turn your body, so you can mix your own spatial experience. So it's going to be,
So it might be, to give that a musical analogy, it might be that you turn to the east and you only get the voice, and you turn to the west and you only get the cello.
And then you mix them by just turning.
And you get,
wow!
Yes.
Yeah.
And you turn to the north and you might get everything. So, I mean, there's almost too much scope, too many possibilities. So we could be playing around for, years if we're not careful.
Well,
there will be decisions to be made, even though I'm very keen on letting go.
Yeah. Andrew, I'm just aware of no one else has said anything yet. I don't know if
we haven't invited them to, have we?
We haven't invited them to.
We could invite.
I did pop something in the chat. I suggested that if anyone in the cafe wanted to to put speak up and tell us their view on any particular topic they could, or if bashful, they could write it in the chat button. So far, no one has.
Well, Alison's written something.
Yeah, I'll come in. I'm just really loving the conversation between the two of you, and the free flow of it. And as you said at the beginning, Ralph, it's not that you've made a project and you're presenting it. It's like the conversation before that's made, and I'm loving that. I don't think I've heard that done before, and I'll be really curious to know how you make some of these decisions when there are so many possibilities. You know, I think that'll be really interesting. And I love this idea of the body as the instrument, playing different things. But when the scope is so big, I wonder how you'll both start finding some limits of composition. Or maybe it's going to be a limitless composition. I don't know. But it's just really nice to hear the two of you talking. It's great.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm sure it won't be limitless. I'm sure we'll find ways.
One of the things which was, Helen, if you remember, which was in the accompanying blurb to the event, was the question of a question I was actually asked. Because I was talking about another project I'm running at the moment as well, to create a poetry trail across the Quantox. Plug for that. Anyone else want to be in on that? Just email me. I'm still looking for people. But somebody said to me she had a philosophical objection to placing sound experienced through your mobile phone into the environment because it took her out of the moment. I just wonder how people react to that. I mean, I know Helen and I have had some time to think about that. And indeed, it's been a theme I've thought about, we in Satsim have thought about over the years, obviously. But I wonder if anybody else has any thoughts on that. Technology in the environment.
I don't know. I'd love to know where the moment on a map.
Sorry?
Say again?
I'm just curious to know where a moment can be put on a map, because if you can be taken out of a moment, I mean, that suggests that a moment is located somewhere, whereas, I mean, you know, you can do all sorts of things with moments. Yeah.
It's a thing people say, isn't it? Being in the moment. And obviously, if you want to commune with nature in a pure way, you go for a walk, you go and sit on a hillock, or, you know, you go and do that. But if you want to experience a piece of art that somebody's done, then you go and do that. It seems quite... I don't see where philosophy comes into it, in a way.
Well, unfortunately, she's not here, but I mean, I agree, Helen. I mean, what we in Satsim, I mean, we've been doing it for a long time, since 2003, and this is a question which comes up often. What we say is that when people sign up for one of our walks, then what you're signing up for is a walk, an audio walk in the environment. So it's like signing up for a theatre performance, you know. In the summer, for example, I went along to, it was the Lord Chamberlain's Men, and they were doing As You Like It at what's it called? National Trust. That's funny, isn't it? Tinsfield. They were doing
Tinsfield.
So a couple of hundred people turned up that in their beautiful environment and sat there and heard something from 300 years ago. So it's a sort of bargain you make, isn't it? It's a sort of deal you make. I'm going to this beautiful natural environment to hear Shakespeare. You go to hear Shakespeare. Maybe the next day they all went for a walk on the Mendips and were in the moment on the Mendips. So that's the other thing.
But I think there are always these different kinds of people who have different responses. In our movement sensing projects, where you move around and you make things happen by breaking sound beams, there are some people, the last thing they want is to know what's happening. They just want to experience it. And then there are a whole load of other people that they want to know exactly what's going on, and they're frustrated that it's not as controllable as they would like. So you kind of, then there are people in the middle, I think, who are just more zen about everything generally, and accept and listen and look and study and get what something valuable out of an experience. So I think that you can't legislate for how people are going to be.
Phil. Hey,
Hello, Phil.
Hi, Phil.
I was
Hi,
going to chip.
Helen.
Oh, I was gonna chip in and say that Tamsin agrees with you there, Ralph, by saying that the piece that you made for Girona, which was the Temple of Hermes, was something that she entered, and she entered it, in full knowledge that she'd be listening to something through her headphones. So she wasn't expecting a sort of quiet solo walk through the temple. And I think Jack Lowe also says that you can always prompt people to on your audio to encourage them to take their audio off or their headphones off, or to put them back on again. So there are different means, aren't there?
Yeah, well, there
Yeah,
are different
yeah.
sort of practical means you can take. For example, SatSynth, the thing SatSynth make. Hi, Phil. Phil's the genius behind SatSynth, behind the SatSynth platform we use, Unity 3D based platform. Yeah, the things we do are you don't have to. You can open the app, stick the phone in your pocket, and use your ears to navigate. The other thing is we don't use any images or video at all, because having people wandering around a natural environment, staring at a tidgy little screen, or in a busy city environment getting mown down by a big red bus because they're immersed in their screen, are not things we want to happen. So there are practical steps you can take to minimize the sort of intrusion of technology into the environment, wouldn't you say, Phil? You're on mute, by the way.
Oh, sorry, I was trying not to interrupt you.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess there's both ways of doing it, aren't there? But like I tend to like just navigating by the ears because I like the surprise, right? I like to know what my movement will do and how it might affect what I'm hearing. But I can appreciate for some people they might like to sort of see things on the screen and maybe like sort of check off all of the sound zones and say, oh yeah, I'm making progress. I can see the list sort of gradually turning green. You know, there's like both ways.
Mm. And
Yeah.
sorry, one thing I actually occurred to me this afternoon as well was that when I go for, and I was talking to Andrew shortly before we started about who was it who was going for a walk with their camera?
Quentin Lake.
Yeah, was
Quentin
he?
Lake.
Quentin Lake. I think he might have been on a bit earlier. But anyway, when I go for a walk, I take my camera, okay, to take pictures, but also as a means of seeing things. So I can see from macro to micro with my camera. So I can sort of look at zones which are beyond the normal human senses, because I've got a telephoto lens, for example. I can see things which I wouldn't see otherwise. So when I'm placing sound into the environment, you're simply using another sense to bring something out of the environment which that sound evocates. Is that a word? Evocates.
It
So
is.
it's an evocation. It's an evocation of something which I can hear in the soundscape. I'm just making it audible.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, Helen. I was
Tonu,
just
I don't know how I pronounce your name, but Tonu,
yeah,
you made a very interesting. You picked up on us talking about the role of the audience, and I think you make a really good point that deciding on the role of the audience can be a very creative part of the process. So I think, yes, this is going to be very important for us. And it may be that different iterations of this piece we create will have different ways of it being experienced. But it's definitely something to think about. So thank you for highlighting that.
Hmm.
Tony, do you want to expand on that more? Is that something that you've, which is your preference?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, recently we collaborated in the community theatre group I work with. We've worked outside in kind of journey walks for 30 years. So the audience always goes on a walk with the performers, and they encounter different things in different places. But recently we worked with Joe Hancock from Burn the Curtain, which is again an outdoor company, sort of Devon based. And Joe is really good at actually saying, look, start by thinking of what do you want the audience to be. So if it's going to be a kind of, if you think of theatre as a ritual, then you want to have something for the audience other than just coming to consume your work, albeit they've got to walk quite a long way to experience it. So we spent a lot of time talking about the frame for that. What did we actually want to give the audience a role, in a sense, so that they're not just people going on a walk. And as our last piece was about the environment in East Dorset, and particularly looking at the river and threats to the river, we wanted to we kind of tied them in with a particular event, which was a kind of post-COVID celebration of someone's life who just died. Anyway, but it gave it a very different thing, and there were portals they had to pass through, and they had to do things. In fact, part of that was singing, which was really quite interesting. So, and we had other things where they would find a piece of text and they would have to read it. Again, a lot of our cast saying, well, that won't work, they'll just read it badly. But what was very interesting was they didn't. Every time people read it, they read it beautifully and gave a really strong addition to the story instead of actors doing it. So it's I mean, for me, I felt it moved us into a new area that was really interesting. And I would recommend
That's really
it.
good to hear about. I think that's certainly for other projects I'm doing, not this one. That idea is really helps me, because I was thinking along those lines anyway. This is for a requiem that I'm doing for Inside Out Dorset, which will be on next year, and it's a procession, and I have been thinking about what the audience will do and what they'll be for, what their role will be. So that what you've just said is very, very helpful. So thank you.
Good. Pleasure.
Yeah,
Sounds good.
I think so. A question we're always encountering in SatSynth as well is, well, yes, what we make is a personal experience. How do you, or do we want to, how do we make that into communal experience? And there are ideas around, Helen, which I don't think we've talked about, which, for example, foresee part of the experience is in a concert hall. Let's say we work together, and up to the first aria is in the hall. The next bit, to hear the next bit, they have to go walking across the Mendips. Then when they walked across the Mendips, they come back into the concert hall on another occasion to hear the rest of it.
The
I think
time
that'd be
scale is
fun.
probably about a week then, is it, or a fortnight?
A month under the full moon. Yeah,
Yeah, that could work.
that could
That
work,
could
couldn't
work.
it? Yeah, yeah.
You have to think about it quite carefully, because you don't want to persuade people into a concert hall for a sort of 20-minute concert. You need to find ways of making each section long enough, I suppose. I think you might be more experienced of making things long than I am. Several of your poems, Fred, are quite long.
I have written a 3.5 hour long poem, yes, but I wouldn't be.
Exactly.
Yeah. I wondered what's time is. I wondered if people would like to hear a bit more of the Mendip poem. Should I?
Oh, that would be lovely.
Should I? Unless, yeah,
Yes.
okay. So I'll read the back bit, because for me, this idea of recitative, of chant, even of some sort of ceremonial ritual is quite strong within the poem. So I'll read the last bit. Charterhouse again. Priddy Hill Farm, a schism of crows. Square Wood, Yoxter Firing Range, Bowery Corner. Stretched and torn, the landscape knits itself together, self-heals and rears towards an epiphany of skylarks. Priddy Nine Barrows. This partial landscape countersinks an epistemology of despair as chunted down swallets to nothingness, gawp-mouthed violated. I vault from here to the end of sideways and settle down to peace. The peace which sows through pine trees. Peace. The peace which runs down the inner side of thighs. Peace. The peace which hops in frogs and unmeditated shopping trolleys. Peace. The peace which sits in put-aside meadows. Peace. Do not try to understand, only comprehend. She will get us in the end. Her inimical spittoons fester on ice, her specks tango to read-only docks. Her cauldrons of undifferentiated loss space out the milestones to infinity. She atomizes perpendicularity. Yet this is the best we have to deal with, not the brightest, just the best. We think some things are more important than others, but the universe doesn't. After all, we are granted mortality. I am looking for the words that unlock this, to fishtail down the singing slope above Lady Well, to nonchalant pass of tree and the long, slow dance of stone. We are here to know what is noble and what weight it will bear, to absorb the exigencies of mushrooms' lives, the silence gathered under the beeches on Nordrak. The catechism of the ages, plain chants solemnly, measuredly under the vault of heaven, unperturbed, serene. Stone be around you and stone before you, stone to cup you and stone under you. Where is the stone that encloses? Where is the stone upon which it is inscribed, we are free? Take the tablets and go down the mountain, the hill, this Mendip. Proclaim it to the people. We are free. There is no for.
I love
Thank
the
you.
bit where you're basically singing
Singing.
St. Patrick's breastplate.
Yeah.
Da 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 da
Exactly.
da 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 da.
There we go. Music
Comes
and
straight
poetry.
out, and it's just the rhythm of the words, and you don't.
Yeah.
It takes you to. It's funny how that happens with some things. It's like you can hear a couple of notes and you know what the song is or what the piece is. But that rhythm of words and the use of some of the common actual words is really reminiscent. So that's something to play with. I did think when I read that bit, I thought, well, maybe we should actually sing it to that tune. But there's also something else I noticed in what you were just reading. You mentioned plain chant, but there's another section where you mention a whole string of dance forms, and straight away into my head comes a suite. Bach meets folk song. You've got minuet and pavan and jig and tango. Tango doesn't usually come into a Bach suite, but the others do.
Yeah.
So it's very suggestive, not in the way it suggests. It suggests things all the time.
Yeah.
The text.
That is actually really useful because I need to work with you to weasel out that suggestivity into music. Yeah.
So there's people are saying they'd like to hear some music. I haven't prepared anything for this, mainly because we had decided it would all be about talking and plotting in a way, and we're doing our plotting in public. But I've put in the chat where you can hear music, and the piece that that Ralph was referring to, Lacrimae, is the music from an outdoor installation where you discover it in the woods. And in fact, that piece is going to be part of Somerset Art Week this year. It's going to be at Fine Court, which is in the Quantocks, strangely, at Fine Court National Trust property on the 24th to 26th of September of this month. So that and lots of other things you can hear on Bandcamp and SoundCloud, but I do apologise for not having prepared anything.
I'm just putting up my website.
You're doing what?
I was just posting my website, ralphhoyte.org. I don't think I've got
Good
it.
idea.
I don't think we haven't even got a page together yet at the moment. But oh, there's Lacrimae. Oh, Phil is going to sing some of the Lacrimae, Helen.
Thank you, Phil.
I don't know if I've actually got a CD player plugged in. Right? It's like a bizarre format these days. But yes, I have a copy.
It's a bizarre format these days. Yeah, I guess it is really. So I always these days say CD stroke digital download.
Right, yeah.
But,
it's like everybody just wants
I like
a file.
CDs.
Me too. I like physical stuff you can hold.
Yep.
Right.
I like vinyl too.
There, it's on the shelf, right? It's like, oh yes, I will listen to that. It's a thing.
Oh, Andrew, that is a testing question. Andrew has just asked, can it still be encountered on the Dorset Ridgeway? I was talking to Ralph the other day, and we don't think it can. Or it may be possible still if you have an Android phone. But
I think yes, if you have
isn't
an
that
Android.
right? You can't experience Lacrimae in its geolocated version in Chapel Coppice with an iPhone anymore.
Can't you, Phil? I thought they
No,
were done as standalone. They're not done as standalones.
Well, no, it's the bizarre thing where they write a letter and say, "Dear Louisa May Alcott, it appears that you haven't updated your novel in a while. We're going to pull it from the App Store because it hasn't received the necessary style guideline updates." Right.
That's really disappointing. But actually, having said that, I've tried to get the local partners, other than SatSynth and Art Music, I've tried to get them to promote Lacrimae several years running when it was still accessible, with zero luck. No success at all. So
yeah, we don't want to get into that technology stuff now.
Stay away from the politics.
Stay away from the politics of technology. Yeah. Okay. I think.
Well, Helen, can I just jump in here and say, Lacrimae wasn't written for specifically that area, though, was it? I mean, it's a piece that can be moved from one place to another, is it?
Oh,
not?
yes, it definitely can be moved from one place to another, and maybe at some point we'll do a geolocated version for somewhere else. Who knows? It was originally a gallery installation with the sound triggered by people's movement, and it's been going for 22 years now. We first did it in 2000, Somerset Art Week 2000 at Shave Farm in North Brougham in Somerset, and it's a film and an outdoor installation and a geolocated soundwalk, thanks to SatSynth. So it's still going strong. And maybe there'll be another iteration.
Okay, well, I mean, does this mean that Helen and Rolf you've run out of things to say? Unbelievable. Surely that's
Well,
not possible.
I'm sure we could wind ourselves up again if you if you want
Well,
us to carry on.
maybe we should find out whether there's anyone in the audience who'd like to, say something, um, chip
Yeah.
in, who hasn't spoken. Um, I sent a little note to Nudge Hairt because I know he's studied composition, he's a poet, and of course he's got years of experience of geolocating audio. But are you going to say
He's a
something?
one-man, so he's a one-man Gesamtkunstwerk.
Gesamtkunstwerk.
Because
Yes,
that was the other thing that was in our provocation, the word
Yeah,
Gesamtkunstwerk,
Gesamtkunstwerk.
yes.
Yes.
It's a beautiful
which
word, but I love to work with silence, as you know, Helen, and
yes,
so I'm doing the paradoxical thing to try to geolocate silence and silent interactions with the world around us. For me, technology. You talked a lot about technology, and I think some people have a fear of technology just because of the fact that it seems so far away from nature, but I don't feel it that way. I feel that it can be a very natural, very organic extension of our senses and our body. And this includes an immersion and experience of silence, which is part of the whole sound world around us and the world of sound in nature and poetry, of course. As poet, for me,
I
it's all
think
about the
you're
silence.
right.
Yeah.
You're right. Even in music, the spaces in between, the sounds, which you could say are silence, are really, really vital. And yes, I'm a great fan of silence
Yeah,
as
it's not
well.
about filling nature with sounds. It's not about putting an extra layer on it. It's about revealing the layers that are already there through very gentle and almost invisible touches you give to that through poetry, through music. Um, uh, we have to take away more than we put over it, and that's at least in my practice so important to invite people to, even through technology, how paradoxical it may sound, just to enjoy what there is already.
Mm.
That is also I think the potential of locative media, that you
Mm.
are in the place and that what you hear and listen there is not detached anymore, but is connected.
Mm. Mm.
So
Do you know? Do you know that many years ago, my eldest son, he can't have been more than 6 or 7 or something. I was looking at one of. He came home from school and showed me one of the paintings, crayon drawings he'd done at school. So it was there was a sort of. You could see that it was obviously a landscape, and he'd drawn some trees above it, and there's a yellow line for the land, and then underneath what I assumed was the earth, there's this wavy line in red with yellow stars in it. So I said, Stefan, what's that yellow line? And he said, it's the singing line below the earth.
wow.
Oh, wonderful!
Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, really, I mean that's what I think of when I think of sound in the environment. I'm listening in to the singing line underneath the earth.
Absolutely. If you listen really well, you can hear the earth spinning.
Yeah, yeah. Especially when you've had a few ciders on the Quantox.
One of the things I did in preparation for this was I looked up various things on the internet, including song lines, which I'm sure everybody knows is an Aboriginal term. They also call them dreaming tracks, and that seems to be, well, it's a lovely idea. And but one of the things it said on Wikipedia is the paths of the song lines are recorded in traditional song cycles. Song
Whoa.
cycles again.
Whoa,
Stories,
Tom
dance, and
Cycles.
art, and are often the basis of ceremonies. So, I think we at a previous point in our conversation, we'd been talking about taking a line for a walk. This idea, lovely piano piece. I can't remember who wrote it, but it's in one of the grade books that I teach my pupils, and it's called Taking a Line for a Walk. And it's a very meandering single line melody for piano, and it's very beautiful. But it's kind of what started me on that thing when I said to you, well, I could write a line. There could be a line that's a melody line, but it's also, a line to speak or a line to walk. And we didn't get very far with that idea, but I think that idea of lines can still be in there, can't it?
Yeah, I think the reason we haven't got very far on anything really is that all sorts of things cropped up over the last couple of months. I mean, there's been illnesses, there's been operations, there's been children needing operations, there's been other projects, there's been, so it's the normality of a artist's life, really. But it's certainly still in there. I mean, we've talked about ways of working together, ways I've worked together in the past with Phil and with Mark Yates, the classical and contemporary composer. It was very interesting when we were composing Hermes, which I set in Girona for the recent walking conference, which was a big fiasco because we forgot to tick the box to make it available in Spain or something. I'm looking at you, Phil.
Yeah, that definitely was my fault. Sorry.
Yeah. Anyway, so the way Phil and I and Mark worked on that was quite interesting, actually, because without even discussing it, I composed the poetry on the theme of Hermes, the messenger of the gods. It was a really slippery sod. Mark composed music. Phil tried out various ways of writing code for it. We then met over a weekend, basically threw everything into the pot and said, hey, that's good, that goes with that. Yeah, how about that? That goes with that, that goes with that. So it's we didn't seem to have to intellectualize it, did we? It was a really practical process. So I don't think in these things, quite a lot of people start off collaborations by saying, what are the parameters of this collaboration? How are we going to do this collaboration? And you think, just do it.
Yeah, well, we have been saying how are we going to do it, but what you've just described is
just an hour doing that, yeah.
What you've just described is a very Cage and Cunningham, John Cage and Merce Cunningham way of doing things. They used to say, well, we'll do something that lasts 5 minutes. So John Cage would go in the corner and Merce Cunningham would go into the other, and they'd come back with something that lasted 5 minutes, and they'd just do it at the same time.
Wow. I'm impressed.
And I'm sure there was more to it sometimes, but that was kind of how they described it.
Yeah.
So I think, if there's integrity in what you're doing, and if you've gone through processes, I'm a huge believer in the process, then I think you can have total faith that what'll come out will be, worth listening to, worth experiencing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that's what I've learned over my many years of doing stuff.
I remember that in the 70s, the big performance artists like Joseph Beuys, like James Lee Byers, they just went in a room, they took a cloth they found on a table, they put it over their head and sat for 10 minutes and it was magic. It just happened. It just was there on the right moment, on the right time, on the right spot. And I remember to come back to locative media, when I worked together with Notus that we had at Novas and a workshop, and we were invited to work with the music students and with photography students, and then we brought them together asking to the photographers to make an immaterial photograph, so to look for a place in the landscape around Manchester as an alternative for the photograph, just to make a look to a photograph, the look itself. And to the music students, the composing students, we asked then for this specific spot that the photographers were looking at, to create a very short piece of music that only could be heard or listened to at that specific spot. And this was in 2012, like 10 years ago. And you could not imagine how big the protest and how difficult it was for the students to accept this form of creating art that was not.
Do you mean the music students?
The music
Do you
students,
mean
yes.
the music?
How can
The
you be
music.
so stupid to make a piece of music that cannot be played in a concert hall, that cannot be reproduced?
But
So
honestly, I don't know if it's still like that, but music students are the most conservative students you'll ever come across.
Are they? All right,
Yeah.
that's put me right off.
That's why, I think that's kind of why quite a lot of the kind of sound art end of music has been appropriated by artists, by visual artists. I use that word appropriated because I consider that, sometimes it is a bit like that. But yes, the music students I was at college with were very, very conservative and traditional.
Do you think that's because of the classical traditions, and there must be the Tao, you must follow the way,
Maybe. Yeah, I don't really know.
Interesting. That's mad. Yeah.
I was surprised.
I would say that's something that I've come across a few times, because I've been commissioned by Trinity Laban in Greenwich here, and to create walks for both composers and also for dance students, and it's clear that the music students do not find it an easy task to do very much on a walk or be involved in anything in any way. And yet, of course, the dancers are all improvising all the time. So you have a kind of weird, tension almost before you begin, where a large number, a big group of people aren't really going to function at all on whatever participatory exercise you try to engage them with, because it's.
But despite the fact that Trinity has some amazingly innovative and interesting people on its staff.
Yeah, I think they were the ones who commissioned me, I think.
We had much the same experience with a piece Phil and I made for a beach in Shetland. Shetland, by the way, if anybody on doesn't know, it's probably about 1,000 miles north of. It's 900 miles north of Edinburgh or something. Shetland is about as far as you can go north and still be in the United Kingdom, and is actually really part of Norway. But anyway. So it's an interesting reaction that one of the, we weren't setting our own material. It was an interesting experience that one of the artists involved was very suspicious of, in fact, the dialogues, whatever else, not sounding like she wanted them to sound. So I think I started off on this. I mean, I think it feeds into that theme that it seems quite a lot of art. Well, it's a way of doing it, I suppose. Spent an awful lot of time making a piece to sound exactly how they want it to sound. They do not want to have it, let's say, okay, you turn east, it sounds different. You turn west, it sounds different. They don't want to give up control of what their work sounds like.
Well, I guess
I hope that's not you. Hope that's not you, Helen.
No, I know, but there are circumstances in which I would feel like that, perhaps.
Okay.
But
yeah.
if I make a conscious decision to you know, to let things happen in a particular work, then
Yeah, that's true.
then that's fine. But maybe there
Yeah,
are circumstances where
yeah,
I would want more control. Not sure, really.
that's true. It's horses
Now,
for courses, isn't it?
have the two of you set yourselves a constraint on when you have to complete this collaboration by,
We're both so busy. We're both so busy that you know, we might come back and do another cafe next year and and not have got much further, mightn't we, Ralph?
No, no, definitely. February the 22nd at 2:45 p.m., Helen.
Okay. No, I hope we will, you know, start doing some of the work, but we do both have a lot of other projects on. Um,
But I mean, yeah, it's gone about technology. It's like, you know, as I say, I've got this whole library of stuff I've been listening to and so on and so forth. I think the way forward is to keep bouncing it back and forward, and
yeah.
you know, I mean, we don't need to meet up to do that, and then when we can, we meet up. I mean, yeah, I've been sort of waiting for this for a long time, and also because as a performer, well, I'm not a performer. I don't know. Maybe I'm a performer. I sort of declaim my poetry. I don't toss myself around the stage or anything. The performance is in the voice. Um, uh, what was my thread? Um, uh, yeah. Yeah, I do want to feed.
Think
I
it's
do want to feed this into perform. Oh yes, as a performer, I do. I mean, we haven't even discussed the question of, for example, if I'm writing what I'm calling a poem script, and you're writing music, and we're trying to combine them into some sort of Gesamtkunstwerk or just an opera or whatever we want to call it, then is it me who's going to be doing the poetry? Is it going to be written for other voices? I'd quite like to work with 3 or 4 people, you know, and
well,
multi-voice
we've
it.
said three. We've said three
3.
voices.
We've said 3,
Could be
yeah,
you and 2 others.
yeah, yeah.
I think we would want singers, wouldn't we? We'd want some
We want
singers.
singers. And perhaps the way to get it moving then is to try and get some funding for it, and that would of course mean we'd actually have to do it. Of course, the commissioners
Yeah,
will
well, this
want
is my
something.
life. I mean, I don't know. I'm in fundraising mode at the moment,
Oh,
so
good.
so I'm full of applications and stuff like that. But come the spring or come the winter, hopefully I won't be.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we all
So
know the way artists. I mean, like I've over there. I have a sort of bookshelf with projects on it, and then something comes up on the internet. Somebody sends something to me. I think, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that won't fit that.
yeah,
Drag that one out, and oh look, it's Helen. Let's do it, Helen. That's the way I
I think
work,
you're right.
anyway.
As long as
Yeah,
I think you're right that as long as we keep talking, you know,
yeah,
and keep bouncing ideas back and forth, we will be progressing.
yeah. And I'd like to keep talking with Phil as well. You know,
Mm.
um,
But do you
because
mean
he.
for this project?
Sorry.
Do you mean for this project?
Well, Phil and I talk, as you know, Helen, Phil and I talk regularly anyway and
Mm.
we collaborate on all sorts of projects. So, yeah, and the subject of Helen and what's going on with Helen does come up at almost weekly
In
meetings.
a
So
fantastic way,
Well,
it
that's
does.
one way.
I'm sure it
we
So
both
does.
that's one way.
we I mean, Ralph, you work with Phil and I work with our sound
Yeah,
designer. So, you know, it may become a point where we need both of them to
yeah,
be
yeah,
involved in some way
yeah,
Yeah.
and invite them, you know, to
yeah,
join the melee.
yeah,
Okay, well, shall we kind of wrap it up and say a big thank you to the pair of you? But we should
yeah,
also say that actually Phil Phelps is going to be making a starring role with Ralph on the 27th of September.
yeah,
So they'll be talking at another cafe, which I didn't mention at the start. So there'll be an opportunity of finding out a little bit more about SatSynth and the technologies that they've been deploying for creating work in and around the southwest for some time on a specific piece which is called Colston's Last Journey. Is that right? Colston's Last Journey.
Right. Yes, yes.
So we'll look forward to that on the 27th. But I just wanted to say a big thank you both to Helen and Ralph for taking us on a journey, which was an intriguing journey. I wasn't quite sure how it's all going to fit together or work out at the end, but I think it's worked out really well. And we thank you very much to everyone else who's come along, and do please look up other events on Soundwalk September. And if you've got a piece yourself to submit before the end of September, make sure you do that. As I say, tomorrow we have a cafe event on Global Soundwalks, and another one on Thursday, which is Black Joy's Stride. So thanks again to both Helen and Ralph. If you'd like to have the last word, each of you, and then we'll close the event. So,
well, I'd just like to say thank you for having us and giving us the opportunity to chat publicly, and also thank you to everybody who's come for being here with us.
Okay, and line from the poem: I pick up my feet and walk. This is, after all, what humans do, have always done: picked up their feet and walked. So, oh yeah, I'd also like to thank Andrew, because at the Girona conference I discovered I was a walking artist. I didn't actually realise that before, so thanks to Walk, Listen, Create, I have now discovered I'm a walking artist, which is very interesting. Yeah, thanks. Okay, bye.
everyone, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah, thank you,
Bye.
Andrew. Bye. Bye.